And the other person came up and rattled it in like.
Yeah, I did the same. The one on the right hand side, it was the left that was.
My name's Chris Grant, and I am the new fire marshal. Jay Wood is retired, so I thought I should come down and enjoy a planting meeting.
Paula.
Paula Webb, that's okay.
He's my bestie.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. I got an email from you today.
Yes.
So, John, how are you?
Well,
Good to see you, Steve Tree Bridge.
Hey, nice to see you, sir.
See you.
Yes.
How
Hi, how are you?
Good. Hey, what's up, Cody? Doing great, man. Good. Hi, Paula.
Hi, I brought in your urban renewal budget for you, just in case you don't get to see it.
I am dying to see it. How you doing, buddy?
good. How about you?
Good.
Natural.
Trying to.
Selling lots of houses.
Also trying to. We have this meeting outside. What do you think?
Move all this equipment.
Is this? Got it. That's okay. Yeah, it's super nice out. It's really hard to say no on a day like this. How's the beer selling?
Good this month already.
Nice.
Last month was that's so great.
Really?
Yeah, everybody was slow.
What do you think causes that?
I think just either people not drinking as much or
Mhm.
some health type things or also weather related type things.
Yeah, I can see that.
But once the kickoff of spring break and it was
Yeah.
started getting people going through, they're like, yeah, I just brought you a cake last week. And they're like, yeah, bring it.
Nice. Let's see. So like last month. Okay, got it. Yeah. I feel like with February and
Oh,
like the
yeah.
late February, it was just like winter again. People just
Oh,
powered down.
It's definitely kind of watch with spending too. Once everybody actually starts getting those tax returns,
Yeah, for sure.
get back right into the restaurants and
Mhm.
yeah, so
Nice.
wasn't too bad. I'll have to explore new areas.
Yeah, that's good.
Downtown Portland, even more. Kind of thing. You're
Yeah.
cleaning up a little bit on there.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, it's changing big time. I was there, dude. When we went down there, I think we were there like 2 years ago. You know, because we go there often enough. Like you like kind of like see some of the carnage and shit. And then like I said, 2 years ago, we were downtown, like on Grant, and weren't that far in. Either way, we were downtown, not downtown, still on the east side of the river. And you're just like, oh, like, sure, you know.
Yeah, the
Yeah, yeah.
it's the
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, for sure.
good spot out there.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. The train station, Union Station is still fucking gnarly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's rough spots.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just like, all right. But there's like those people are just like so like in their own world of like whatever issues they have, like you can walk right past them, they don't even see you.
Oh yeah.
They're just like whatever they're doing, dude, like they're just doing it.
Yeah, I walked by one and usually they have them there bursts and like you just like walking by. Well, this guy, I'm like right next to him and he has little outbursts and just immediately like flipped on like it's like kind of snaps back at him and just like looks and just kind of like went away. So,
Yeah.
just take me back to the Dalles right now.
Well,
When's the last time you've been in?
in what?
Brewery.
Last time I've been to the brewery, I wanted to go Tuesday night, but you guys are closed. I needed a Detroit style bad. I think just a couple weeks ago. I went in for lunch.
Coach coming up
Guess-
pretty soon.
Nice.
We have the coach, got
It's is it Kill the Keg Fridays or is it Kill the Keg starting now? Starting now. Got it. Okay.
all the dark beers, just all those winter beers need to be going.
I have to balance that out, dude. I got a pretty big bike ride planned on Sunday. I can't spend
So carb
the
load up.
next. There's a balance to be achieved there. So the gravel grinder in Dufresne, that's April 28th. So I'm gonna go do that loop on Sunday and scope it out and then, have shorter rides in between and then go do that again on the 28th. Yeah.
Ready to rock.
That. What's that? Oh, sorry. Meeting time then.
Oh.
Okay. Planning Commission, April 3rd, 2025. It is 5:30. I call this meeting to order. Paula, may you please have the roll call?
Present.
Cody Cornett,
Present.
John Grant,
Present.
Rhea Pena,
Present.
Terry Pipinich,
Present.
Popoff is absent, and Nick Portella is absent.
Excellent. Thank you. The Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
for all.
All right. Next is the approval of the agenda. If everyone has read the agenda, may I please have a motion to approve with a second?
Motion to approve the minutes? Or I apologize.
Seconding.
Approval of the agenda.
Second.
Approve the motion to approve the agenda has been made along with a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Next is the approval of the minutes from the March 6th, 2025 meeting. If everyone has read those minutes, may I please have a motion to approve with a second?
I motion.
approve.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
I motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
And it has been seconded. The minutes from the March 6th. Those in favor of approving the minutes from the March 6th, 2025 meeting, please raise your right hand, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Next is the time for public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Anyone in the public care to make public comments?
I'm the new fire marshal, who would retire. My name's Chris. And a planning meeting, because this is where it all happens.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. In that case, that'll conclude that part of public comment. Next is a discussion item. Planning Commission restructuring opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cornett, Commissioners Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. As mentioned here, our one item on the agenda is discussion, and we briefly touched on it at the last meeting. And this is this idea, we're taking a look at, two different approaches to restructuring the Planning Commission. As you know, the Planning Commission plays a crucial role in ensuring sustainable development, balancing community needs, and guiding responsible land use decisions. So as you know, we meet, regularly scheduled meetings occur on Tuesdays, the first and third Thursdays of each month. Get into that a little bit. These two options we're talking about, potentially reducing those down to one meeting a month. The other is the introduction of a hearings officer, and that is something that is going to take up probably the majority of this discussion. I think that first key point is pretty easy to discuss here. So diving right into it. Planning Commission meetings, as I mentioned, first and third Thursday of each month. One of the options we are looking at for restructuring the commission is reducing that down to just one meeting a month. The basis behind this really is, taking a look back at, statistically, all of the information that we have, dating back about 11 years from 2013. 55% of these meetings have been canceled for one reason or another. I am not really in support of just having meetings for meetings, and I want to use people's time wisely. There is the ability. I mean, here I think we might look at a pretty short meeting. We could, when you reduce it down to one meeting a month, you can kind of load up each of those meetings and have more, thoughtful discussions, more full meetings. But really that is, one of the things that we looked at is just reducing the number based on just the fact that less than half of the meetings over the last 12 years have been canceled. So we are sending out a lot of meeting cancellations, more meeting cancellations than meeting invites. So this has ranged through the years. I think last year, as you know, we had a lot of cancellations. There were some staffing shortages playing into that. As I was looking back at the date, I was thinking to myself, is it just something that's been happening recently? And it's just, there's waves. There's waves at times. Some years they're up, some years they're down. COVID, of course, was kind of a blip in all the scheduling. Recommendation that we would have is actually moving it so that if we were to go this route, the first Thursday of every month is what we would look at having those planning commission meetings. The reason being is we also have our urban renewal agency, which the community development department supports, occurs on the third Tuesday of every month. So, selfishly for our staff, when we have two meetings in 1 week, it can be pretty brutal as far as preparing the packets that go into each. So kind of taking a look at that and not wanting to, thinking about overall team bandwidth, meeting preparation, these timelines, different constraints. We would recommend, if this is the option, to have these on the first Thursday of each month. We do understand that this could pose a potential conflict with typically New Year's Day or Independence Day could very well fall on one of those first Thursdays. We think we can mitigate that just with future planning ahead. Also, there is the ability, we can always schedule a special meeting. So special meetings we've done them here before when we've had to reschedule things. So special meetings can be planned. The second point of this discussion tonight, the idea of the hearings officer, to kind of keep in lockstep with that, we could potentially, if we were to go the hearings officer route, continue to have the first and third Thursday, but that third Thursday would be the evening where we could have those hearings officer hearings. So that's just the option that we're throwing out there. And maybe before we jump into the second item, just wanted to get the commission's thoughts on that. Any comments, concerns, questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think going down to one meeting a week with special meetings as needed is great.
One meeting a week. I'm not.
Sorry, one meeting a month.
Yeah, I
One
would
meeting a
like, yeah.
Sorry.
one meeting a month.
That's a lot of meeting.
And I have always thought about like, you got the staff
Yeah.
that are on salary working 40 weeks, so 40 hours a week already, adding these meetings to it. If we can make better use of our time and especially your time in that sense, I think that's going to be better for everybody.
Great. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate the comments. I think that was the easy one, so we'll jump on to the next. Sounds like we have full support from the Planning Commission. looking ahead, just to give you a heads up, we'll touch on it at the end. After this, we're actually going to have this discussion we'll be presenting to the city council. So the city council is the ultimate authority to make changes to the planning commission. But it is good, as we go into those discussions to hear any concerns that the planning commission may have with any one of these topics, so we can relay that information to the city council so they know, so they can make the best decisions. So the next item here is the adoption of a hearings officer into the land use review process. So a hearings officer is an impartial third-party land use attorney, which would be contracted by the city of the Dalles to review specific types of land use applications. This professional would ensure that the city's land use processes are efficient, impartial, and compliant with established legal standards. The use of a hearings officer has been successfully implemented around the state. Other communities such as Wasco County uses a hearings officer. Deschutes County, the city of Happy Valley, the city of Salem, to name a few here. So the hearings officer would be responsible in this, what we are proposing would be responsible for reviewing land use applications that require decision-making beyond simple administrative processes. So, and when we're looking at land use processes, the city of the Dalles is a little more unique, but most, when you look at the structure of land use, your applications are type 1, 2, 3, and 4 here in the Dalles. They are ministerial, administrative, quasi-judicial, and legislative. They mean the same thing. Type 1 through 4, what I just listed, ministerial up to legislative, same thing. As you may know, ministerial applications, these are building permits, these are sign permits, change of uses. These are things that are handled by a planner in the office. The next step up is an administrative application. An administrative application is something like a minor partition or a subdivision or a site plan review. And then there's quasi-judicial, which come in front of the planning commission. So there's those ministerial and administrative applications that the planning commission doesn't even review at this stage. So we wouldn't be implementing the hearings officer into those reviews at all. It would just be for this quasi-judicial step. So quasi-judicial examples of those: conditional use permits, variances, which are some that we've discussed just in the recent months. But also what the planning commission hears is the appeals to those administrative actions, which y'all have heard quite a few appeals. So administrative action, director makes a decision on administrative action. There's an appeal period. That appeal then comes in front of the planning commission to decide on. Then your decision, as you know, your decision can be appealed to city council. City council is the final say for the city of the Dalles when it comes to land use decisions.
And sorry, unless
Yep, go for it.
Unless it's appealed again, unless it's appealed to the city council level, in which case it goes to LUBA.
Yeah, so still though, the city council is the final say for the city. So the city's final decision is the city council. Actions, any city council decision, any city council land use decision can be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Once it goes to the Land Use Board of Appeals, it's out of our hair. We're more kind of in the background. City attorney gets involved. We assist through the process, but it's handled by attorneys at the state level.
Okay.
So the hearings officer, what we would be proposing, these specific applications we would be talking, they would basically be stepping in for the planning commission to hear some of these cases that the planning commission hears. So we're talking about these appeals to the administrative actions. So that would be something that a director makes a decision. If it's appealed, it goes to a hearings officer. The next would be taking a look at those type 3 applications, or our quasi-judicial applications. These are those conditional use permits, the variances. Instead of the planning commission overseeing those, a hearings officer would. The others would be, the other thing to touch on here is the appeals of a quasi-judicial action. So that's something I'll touch on in this next section here. So appeals of quasi-judicial actions, as you know, as I just mentioned, those go to the city council to make that decision. So the city's final decision, which we were just talking about, is currently the city council. City council is responsible in this process. When you establish a hearings officer, the city's council would be responsible for determining whether the hearings officer is the city's final say on an application or not. So there is an option that a hearings officer decision could be appealed to city council to have city council make that final say. Or there is an option where the hearings officer's decision is the city's final decision, and then that can be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. So effectively, what it does is it takes that land use decision making out of the hands of the local authorities, and it goes to a contracted third party attorney.
What about, okay, so let's take the, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay.
It's fine. You
Um,
may have my same question. I don't know.
All right, so let's take like the Basalt Commons project, for example.
Yeah.
So it came to planning commission appealing, no, it came to planning commission for the variance. Excuse me, not the variance.
That conditional use permit for the height? Yep.
Yes, conditional
That was
use
a quasi judicial, which came to you first. You had the first bite at the apple, if you will.
Right. So we get that. And then we make our decision. And then our decision is appealed regarding the property owner to the east. And then it comes back to us. We make our decision. Then if he were to appeal it again, then it would have went to city council, correct?
Yeah, so that one was like there's three applications in that one project. The one that you didn't hear was a minor partition, that's a replatting of land, wasn't really contentious at all. The
Right.
other was the variance, that was increasing the height, that was quasi judicial. The type 3 application started with you. You were the very first decision. It was appealed, and when that was appealed, it went to city council. The next application that came in was the site plan review. We reviewed the site plan review, that the director made the decision on that. That was appealed, came to planning commission.
That was appealed by the furniture store owner.
Correct.
Okay.
And that did not get appealed to city council.
Okay. So in this case where if we have a hearings officer, it's still three separate applications. So that hearings officer would have heard that. Well, of those three applications, he would have heard two of them.
So if
The height and the site plan review. The site plan review appeal.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just the reason I ask is just let's say he was to make similar decisions as we did.
Mm-hmm.
Would the process for those appeals still go to city council?
That would be a decision that city council has to make. And it would also, to move the conversation along with city council, it would be great to, maybe walk away from this discussion today, maybe knowing what the planning commission is recommending in that case. So there is the option that the hearings officer, that's your final say. And I can say I have included in my staff report, staff's recommendation. I've thought about it a little more. Maybe recommendation is a little more split, but staff's recommendation is that the hearings officer's decision could be appealed to city council. Part of the reason that's staff's recommendation here is that is a conversation that I've had with Wasco County. That's currently what they're doing. So it's a local example that we can pull from.
Sorry, say it again. So hearings officer makes the decision.
It gets appealed, it goes. to
Wasco
gets-
Council has the final
It
say.
goes, it goes to the Board of County Commissioners. Yep. So when you look at it, there are pros and cons to it. Pros, obviously, there's the final say is the local authority. There's some cons in that potentially, maybe not as impartial. But you can also look at, in the event a hearings officer makes the final decision for the city, you can imagine how much time that would cut out of the overall land use process. So the land use process in the state of Oregon, from the day an application is deemed complete, we have 120 days to make a decision, and some of these projects slug along and they go up to 120 days.
Yep.
And then an application can be appealed to LUBA, and then that's even longer. So we can have some very long applications to build out subdivisions, build out multifamily projects. If you do the hearings officer, you could probably cut that time in half.
I may be jumping ahead here. Is there any opportunity for us to recommend, and ultimately the city council decide this, for certain things to just have the hearings officer be the final say, and then not certain things go back to city council? You know, maybe some things that require maybe a little more local touch, or that would, where perhaps the applicant and the general population would appreciate a local touch.
I mean, haven't looked into that. I don't know if our city attorney, Jonathan Kara, has any comments on that right off the bat. Jonathan, in the sense of basically certain applications can be appealed to city council, certain can't.
Yeah, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm currently on the road. I apologize.
Actually, we can't hear you. We can't hear you very
Sorry.
well at all.
Is this any better?
A little bit, yeah.
How about now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Again, I'm on the road, so if I lose reception, I'll try to be quick. Yeah, there's no reason why the city couldn't have different appeals processes or different hearings officer, implementation for different types of applications. But I think that it would be worth having a conversation as to why the planning commission would want to reserve that. And I know, you mentioned a local touch, but I think it would be a much harder way. I think you would have a hard time articulating exactly which kinds of applications, or at least I can't think of any off the top of my head that the planning commission would want to reserve. And I know that Josh is still going through his staff report, but he hasn't really mentioned yet, what the planning commission's role would be if the officer for all quasi-judicial type applications. I think that, frankly, that would free up the planning commission to focus. It would shift the focus of the planning commission in a different direction. Usually, the planning commission handles both applications and everything else. But I think if we start to remove the appeals process from your agendas, it would free you all up to engage in some long range planning for the future of our city. And I think that would be something that city council would be interested in too. But to answer your question in a really long-winded way, I don't believe that there's anything stopping the city council from implementing a hearings officer in some situations and not in others. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and thank you, Jonathan. And yeah, I'll continue to go through, but I just wanted, that is a point, the city's final decision. Did we answer your question, Commissioner Case?
Keep going. I might have more later. It's fine.
Okay.
I mean, I have one, but it's fine.
Yeah, and feel free with this discussion layout format here. Feel free to interrupt me. It's not like a typical process where I'm, going through the staff report, step by step. I kind of want this to be some open dialogue for you all. So feel free to interrupt me whenever.
I do have a question. I think that, like what Jonathan said, like it does move us to a different direction. And while I appreciate that, so how would we? I don't have time every day to go through all the things online to see, you know what I mean? So if we have a hearings officer, are we still getting that information? And are we still, you know what I mean? Because I think that removes us from some of the things that are going on, and then people talk to us, you know what I mean, or ask questions about things, and then we don't know anything if we have a hearings officer, and then it just goes directly to city council. That makes me feel like we aren't really here doing a job that we're supposed to be doing besides long range planning, which I understand, and I think that's very valid and very important. But day-to-day stuff that we're in the weeds with currently, from time to time, we would not necessarily know about that, and that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, so I value that opinion. I'm not sure where it's at in the staff report, but the idea around it would be, if we were to go the hearings officer route, all of those items that are discussed with the hearings officer, they would be brought up in a staff update every single planning commission meeting.
Okay.
So at least once a month, you would hear about the decisions or the applications that were heard by the hearings officer. That process where you'd probably hear about it after the fact.
Mhm.
So that may, require some
It
tweaking
doesn't
there.
feel, I mean, sure, like I understand where it's coming from and I understand cutting time and all the other, I get it. It just doesn't feel like it's real purposeful then, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's purposeful. Yeah, yeah. And I mean,
But I understand the other purpose of us, and that's the long range plan. Like I get that, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like that's not an issue. But the stuff that we currently see, not that we all need to have our hands in all of it. I'm not saying that either, but knowing about it, so in a staff report after the fact is fine. And if you knew about it ahead of time, like these are the things that are going before the hearings officer. You know what I mean? I mean, and I know that might be duplicate information. I don't know the answer. I'm just saying like that just doesn't feel great as a planning commission that should know all of those things, and we're finding out about it after the fact, if that makes sense. That's
Yeah, and it could be planned before, it could be, knowing that we have a hearings officer agenda up for applications on the agenda. Those
I
can
don't
be
know. I
brought
just
to your
that was just
attention.
a
Yeah,
feeling. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's no problem.
Chair
Definitely.
Cornett,
Oh,
Yes.
sorry,
Yes.
thank you. I just wanted to jump in. I don't think there's anything stopping the planning department from sending out an email. I mean, we already issued notices of, like, for example, notices of appeals, right? And those go out to the planning commission and to parties of record. And so I'm not the direct, but I think we could very simply notice the planning commission of these kinds of, like, hey, officer, this is the submitted notice of application, just to keep you guys in the loop.
Mm.
That could be something that we, interject into our current process.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it would
Feels
be
better.
I think it would be similar in the sense that, I mean, right now, I mean, I believe you're all receiving notices every time we have a minor partition that goes out that you may not need to know about. Someone's replotting their land, they have 3 lots and they want to turn it into one. You're all receiving those notices already.
Mhm.
So it would be a similar process, I think. But something to be mindful of, and make sure that we do it in a,
Sorry.
yeah,
Just
no, it's a good comment. I appreciate that.
yeah. Think one of the things that comes to mind for me is the size of the area of the city versus some of the other municipalities that you've mentioned. Wasco County as a whole having a hearings officer. That's a lot more land. Same with some of the cities that you described. And being a planning commissioner, I don't think that we've been overstimulated with the amount of quasi judicial hearings that we've had here in the past. So I don't know if a city our size would really warrant having a hearings officer to where we would have to pay somebody for their time. I mean, I understand it does speed up the process, but I do think it also gives a sense of the community to the citizens to know that they can send the emails. We have them in front of us. We do have a hearing process, and we can keep it open to the public. It gives it a little bit more transparency. So yeah. So.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's a good point. I didn't include it in here, but I do know that there is the land use attorney that we were connecting with to provide this information to us. He goes out and he serves communities in Eastern Oregon. So he serves some pretty small communities. City of Hood River is also looking into implementing the same thing. They're half the size population wise. So I do hear your points though. And yeah, that's what this is all about. I wanted to bring it. Yeah, go for it.
so the hearings officer, would it be in a format similar to this, or would it be they come to your office and read all the things and ask the questions? It like what does that look like?
Yeah, and if I'm happy. How about I dig into this a little bit more because I think I might answer some
Okay,
more of these
sorry.
questions. No, it's all good. I know I kind of took us off, so I'll dig into it a little bit more. So the legislative actions, to point out, legislative actions, those would still be handled how they're being handled. Those are those zone changes, comprehensive plan amendments, zoning ordinance amendments, our RV park code when we did the density changes, all those outside of the hearings officer's purview. They would not touch those at all. That would just be that would just be the planning commission and the city council. Looking at a cost analysis of this, the cost of a hearings officer ranges depending on the attorney and where you're at in the state. They're ranging for about $135 an hour to $350 an hour. Some cities, larger cities, definitely larger cities, have a salaried chief hearings officer. Actually, the city that I worked at before this, the city of Jacksonville down in Southern Oregon, it's about 2,000 people. They have a hearings officer. So, there is a wide range. It's a format that's available in the land use process, so it's something it's tailor fit to the community. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. It's not a one size fit all type of thing. The city, of course, with this, there is that chief hearings officer that's salaried. That's not something we are considering here. Instead, the city would be looking at something, establishing an RFP process, looking for requests for proposals, requests for qualifications for land use attorneys to be able to go through a selection process that way. Staff is proposing an allocation of $10,000 into this next fiscal year. Of course, that is all going to be dependent on these conversations with the Planning Commission and City Council. But with our budget process occurring right now, it was something that we felt that we needed to get the money in there in the event that this is something that would be considered potentially by the end of this year or next year. We based that amount on the average amount of applications that are heard. About 7 or 8 applications have been heard on average over the past about 11 years, that same time frame that I looked at for meetings and cancellations. The Wasco County, they can't say enough good things about it. The Wasco County's community development director has actually mentioned she may come to city council to discuss overwhelming success over there. Their planning commissioners have really appreciated the process. What they have done with fees is it's resulted in a 10% increase in their application fees. So to try to offset, what we're doing is we're budgeting $10,000 in the fiscal year budget. Wasco County, how they're doing it is they are actually increasing those application fees. And she has mentioned over there, Director Kelly Housley Glover has mentioned their applicants haven't winced at the increase in the fees just because the process has been so streamlined. So the process for implementing a hearings officer, there's multiple code amendments that need to be made, and Titles 10 and Titles 11 of the Dalles Municipal Code, various changes need to be made. The commission's bylaws need to be changed because, all throughout it currently reads that the Planning Commission makes these decisions. We would go through a request for proposal process, which I talked about. There's the coordination and consultation. This would be something, working with the City Council, Planning Commission, City Manager, and City Attorney to ensure that these changes align. And the implementation timeline, staff's, is confident that we could, if this is something that's supported, is something that we could implement by January 1st of 2026. Community engagement, I think we touched on this a little bit. Community engagement is something we want to ensure that that's still very much part of the process. It's part of our, community engagement is one of the cornerstones of the statewide planning goals. We want to make sure that people have a voice in this process. We also want this process to be flexible. So ensuring public involvement is a key element to this change. Promoting transparency. Meeting with hearings officers will remain, except we want to make sure that's accessible to the public. Wasco County's example, they are able to basically meet people where they're at, and they have provided virtual meetings for them. They are, some prefer, in some formats, some prefer those evening meetings, some prefer meetings in the daytime. I've always been one to think of, I know sometimes meetings can go long, but I've always kind of been one that's more in support of night meetings because I do believe we're all busy, we all have jobs, and to give people in the public the right to hear about something, they should be able to get there after business hours. So, but those can all be adjusted. Public hearings can occur regular. What we're thinking is our historical time slots, which like I mentioned earlier, the third Thursday, staying at 5:30 to accommodate community members who want to participate during outside of those business hours. These meetings can be held similar to what they are. They can be held in person. There can be virtual options. We can make it, basically it would be the same type of format here. So pros and cons, jumping into that. The pros of implementing hearings officer. Hearings officer brings specialized legal knowledge. They are land use attorneys. Efficiency, delegating their tasks to them can cause, it can streamline the process, as I mentioned. They are impartial. So the use of an independent third party ensures decisions are made without political or community bias. And this one, I know that we've talked a little bit of having that local feel. I can't put it enough. We shouldn't be putting a local feel into land use decisions when we're talking about clear and objective standards. That'll be kind of my point for the evening. Also, reduce planning commission burden. And I know it sounds like maybe this isn't something that's really being considered. So maybe I'll just bypass that and jump to the next. So the cost is one of the cons. I mean, as I mentioned, we're estimating or we're budgeting $10,000 for this, so there is a cost to hire someone out. The appeals process is something that we would need to work on to adjust. That is something, we need to figure that out, whether or not it's the hearings officer is the final say, what the case may be. Workload for staff really kind of stays the same. We would be preparing meetings. Maybe we wouldn't be putting together public meetings, but we would be preparing that information whenever a hearings officer meeting is needed. And one that is a little bit, it can cause a slight delay in the process is there's typically a hearings officer needs time to deliberate on the issue before issuing out that decision. So as I mentioned, staff coordinated with the Wasco County Planning Director as well as a well-known state land use attorney to gather all the information here. These really were based on, just trying to assess best practices through this whole entire structure. We do want to touch on once again, when we'll get into it, we just really want to determine, if this is something that we go forward with, what the city's final decision is. I think that's very important. Financial considerations will be something that we will always need to consider throughout the process, whether it's an increase in fees or whether we are looking at continued contract budgeting every year in the fiscal budget. And then to improve clarity, applications, one of the recommendations we had from the land use attorney we worked with was to try to align the terminology type 1, 2, 3, and 4. That was his experience to try to align that so we can kind of shift around. Not a big change, I wouldn't think, on our end. Overall, this is I think we kind of jumped around a little bit on this, which is fine, which I wanted. Next steps looking ahead is I'd like to get some more, insight from y'all on what you're feeling about these potential changes. And we will be discussing this with City Council at our April 28th meeting and incorporating these comments and see what the next steps would be after that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We can dig into any finer details. Go from there.
I have finer details if you don't
Yeah.
mind. Okay. So I want to clarify something that I said earlier when I said that the hearings officer or certain decisions made by the hearings officer could either be appealed to city council, not us, and other things could be just appealed directly to LUBA. For instance, I think we could do it based on like geography. Like if there's a land use decision that happens within the historic downtown, those should be appealed to city council. Other things should be appealed directly to LUBA, perhaps. The reason that I said, a local touch on some of these things, yes, the planning commission is, we base our decision on the black and white of the code, clear and objective. We know that, but there's some things when they're escalated to city council where that personality on that board has a little more influence on the decision than what we can on this commission, right? The sign thing, for instance, billboard decision. The other aspect of that local touch that I meant when I said that is we see and we make decisions that if they weren't in front of us, we wouldn't know that the RV parks, for example, if we didn't know that those decisions were happening and that so many of the community members felt a certain way about it, that would not have initiated us to make those changes in the code. Same thing with the density issue that we had with that property on West 15th.
Yeah.
We only knew that because we went through that appeal process and we're like, oh, we need to change the code. So I think that it would be important for us if these hearings officer meetings are indeed accessible to the public and recorded, that if they are to go to the hearings officer and no longer to us, that we have to watch those and stay informed on them, because that's the only way we're going to know what the people are dealing with. And that is what I'm afraid of losing. But again, it would be up to us if the information is available for those publicly accessible meetings to just stay informed on that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would just be a little bit nervous about the latency, but again, if we're on the planning commission, that would just become part of our responsibility.
Yeah.
Got something to piggyback on that. I definitely, how would I word this? Just there doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of benefit. I understand that some people or some areas are just love this process. But I do think it puts us out of touch on the information on how to work on the long-term planning, and we would be raising costs, and I don't think anybody wants to raise up the cost of applications when we're more than capable to oversee these hearings. And then we'd have to go through bylaws changes. The staff would have to put a lot of time and effort into making this come together before January 2026. So, when we weigh the pros and cons, I just don't see a big benefit from this.
Actually, Addie, you go real quick, if you don't mind.
I was just gonna say that I feel 75% better knowing that the hearings officer, it would be a public situation, much like this, because I think that whether we're on the planning commission or not on the planning commission, it's available for us to see or to attend, and keeping our Thursday schedule. So we may not be sitting up here, but there's no reason we couldn't come and listen so that we were engaged. And that's what I was missing, like on that. That was the piece for me that brings it all home. I do think it's probably much more efficient. I think they would be knowledgeable in the area that we potentially are not. Just because we're community members doesn't mean that I don't know a lot about land use. I do a lot of research before I come to things, but that's not my expertise, and it's not going to be. And I think, so that was the piece I was missing. So I'm grateful to see that that's there, because I do think that people are still able to share their testimony and share their conversations, or share all that public information, so that they're essentially switching out spots with Cody, realistically, and listening to all of that. And there's no reason. I think it streamlines things, and I think feel better about it now. But I'd like, I still think we could work on the behind the scenes, like figuring out what those look like, so that if it is going to be something contentious or something that could be appealed that we would need to know about, we would have a heads up about that as far as that's concerned. Jonathan was saying, like an email about things like that, just to give us a heads up of what's happening, so that we would be forewarned, so that it would be a smooth transition. And those are kinks that'll just have to work out. And anyways, so that was just my comment.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think just real quick, those appeals wouldn't come to us.
No.
Yeah.
But we need to know about them because we
Oh,
are
gotcha.
the planning
Yeah.
commission.
Sure.
So that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. So like if we had the information, that's what I was afraid we were going to be missing, is that if we're not involved at all, then we're just getting a report that says, oh, this is what happened. Well, that's great, but what if, you know what I mean? Because then we're still on the planning commission. So we're still going to be approached for those conversations, even though it doesn't come to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I get you.
So that's the piece I was missing. So that makes me feel a lot better. Not that matters, but there you go.
Jonathan, Kara.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you guys are all mentioning nothing here is unique to the Dalles, right? And so as this process was being developed in Oregon and in other states throughout the country, planning commissions everywhere were having the same kind of conversations. And so I'm encouraged to hear that we're having that kind of a conversation here tonight. As far as I just wanted to address a couple of the concerns and maybe offer a different perspective. And so I think Commissioner Grant mentioned, and I think Josh mentioned earlier, the proposed budget here around $10,000. Josh, is that for the fiscal year?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay. And so that would be a proposed budget, and budgets are estimated guesses. And oftentimes, for example, the legal department for the city of the Dalles frequently over budgets. And so I think the budget this year for my department was like $670,000, but I don't think I've ever spent more than about half of that. And so that's probably on me, not a great, example, but it doesn't need to be terribly expensive. However, I think that a part of the conversation that I see frequently overlooked, not just on this planning commission, but just generally on the conversation of planning commissioners versus hearings officers, is the actual reduction in costs to the city that is in theory associated with the fact that a hearings officer as a land use professional should be making well-reasoned and well-supported decisions. And this is not a jab at the planning commission, and you guys have all been great, and I know the work that you all put into this. But in theory, 10 years from now, none of you could be on the planning commission, and it could be filled with different people. But the idea there is that one day the planning commission could make a decision based off of something that isn't substantial evidence that's in the record. The planning commission, in theory, could make biased decisions for their friends, their family, whoever the case is, or the one that supports their interests in a way that isn't obvious. And I think the idea behind a hearings officer, one of the things that I personally like very much about it in my capacity as the attorney for the city, is that in theory, they shouldn't be making any decisions based off of anything other than what is written in our code. In the code, Title 10, which is the code that you all use whenever we're having anything before the Planning Commission, is never going to change without the Planning Commission's involvement, as Chair Cornett mentioned. And so, as I tried to say earlier, it definitely involves a shift in the Planning Commission's role in our city. And it's in a lot of ways a less direct role, but in more ways, I think it would result in a more direct role in the future of our city's planning. You guys would have more time to approach code changes, and we might, I mean, it's been quite some time since we've had a substantive code amendment before the Planning Commission. And so you would hear less hearings, and not all the hearings are super controversial. Some of them certainly can be, but again, in theory, it should be less expensive for the city to pay a hearings officer to make sound, reasoned, well-supported decisions based off of the text in our code that you all write or direct, me to write. Than it would be for, let's say, a biased planning commission one day makes a decision just to support the needs of, their own personal interest or the interest of a family member or a friend or a business partner. Because those kinds of decisions will nearly certainly always be appealed. And the amount of upfront costs associated with staff time, the planning director's time, the city attorney's time, and that's not even to say the outside counsel's time that we would be engaging in for those kinds of appeals. $10,000 is a bargain. I think it's almost like you're buying insurance. Coupled with the fact that hearings officers, the hearing that the hearings officer would be presiding over, is always going to be open to the public. And I think Commissioner Case mentioned not only can the public attend, but the planning commissioners themselves can attend. If you want to have the most, boots on the ground type of mentality here, there's no reason whatsoever that a planning commissioner couldn't attend. And so there's lots of opportunities, I think, for this idea to be a tremendous success. There are absolutely investments in time and staff time, the planning director's time, the city attorney's time. Right now, if we were to go down this road to get these changes implemented, I'm not going to say that there aren't, that there isn't, but just like everything else, a step at a time. And I'm certainly not complaining about any additional work there. That's the job. And that 6 month, or not the 6 months, excuse me, the January 1st deadline that the planning director mentioned, and that Commissioner Grant referenced, I think that's aspirational. I don't, I know it's aspirational. Rather, it's certainly not a set in stone kind of a deadline. And so, hey, if it doesn't happen until February or March next year, it's not the end of the world for anybody. So I just wanted to get some of those thoughts, expressed, and hopefully it's helpful as the rest of this conversation develops. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pipinich?
Is appreciate Jonathan's input there. That was sort of the thing that was running through my mind, was that if we're doing our jobs right with the review, we should be coming to the same conclusion that a hearings officer is, if we're basing it off of the facts in front of us in the code. That shouldn't change the decisions that are coming out of the city for these kinds of actions. And so if it's creating a situation where the process is more efficient for the folks that are looking at doing development in the city, then I think it's a positive opportunity for us to continue to make that development climate better. So appreciate that, and the insight into sort of what that process looks like for staff. And would just be interested too in some of Josh's thoughts on some of the things that we could be spending time on if we were shifting some of this responsibility to the hearings officer.
Yeah, what are we going to do with ourselves?
I was gonna give you all a bunch of time off. No, so coming up, some of the things like we have floodplain amendments that are coming up. We are working through. We just started. We'll be having some first meetings on an economic opportunities analysis. That is, we have an advisory committee set up for that, and we're going to be working through that process, which is going to result in potentially some code amendments, but definitely some comprehensive plan amendments. So those will be in front of you. Probably around July or August. We also would be looking at, you know, the potential for some sign code updates. Those would be things that would be happening at some point in the next year. I'll say that, just, you know, due to overall bandwidth. So a lot of, you know, taking a look at code amendments, taking a look at different studies, being involved in things like the housing production strategy, the housing needs analysis. So that would be looking at more of your visionary type of products that you would be working on compared to day-to-day current review permit reviews. To Jonathan's point, you know, there are some of those contentious applications, and I think those that, you know, the community may get one way or the other about, and there may be this need or this want to try to support and have that local feel on it. But there's also some other things that come up that we still have to bring in front of you, like a sanitary pump station, like a new substation, like an electrical substation, a water reservoir. These things that are necessities to the city's utility infrastructure system, that there is really no gray area. They are, the only reason they are coming in front of you is because they are conditional use permits, and you are here to basically just, I think, well, I won't say you're here to just agree with the director, but in those three examples that I brought up, they were very quick meetings because there wasn't much to them. They were additions to the city's infrastructure. So those are the types of things that would be heard in front of a hearings officer. So just my 2 cents. Happy to answer any other questions. Any other comments that you all have? I mean, like I said, I wanna have bring this in front of our city council, and maybe at the end of all of it, maybe I just want to do a check-in. Do you think this is a conversation worth bringing in front of the city council? Maybe that's.
I think it would be yes. I think it would be a good idea in response to Commissioner Grant's thoughts and mine. You know, the cost is going to cost. Let's say we're going to budget 10 grand for this. Maybe look back over the past handful of years and say, okay, out of all the, try to put a cost on your time that this hearings officer would be taking. Like if this hearings officer existed over the past, whatever, 5 years or a handful of years that you've been looking at this, you know, I know that's kind of hard to assess because you know, it's salary, but just, you know, break it down to the extra hours put in that your staff wasn't doing something else for some of this appeal stuff that, you know, or just, you know, the different kind of prep that you would need for the type 3 and type 4 meetings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you can put a number on like, this is what we're going to pay a hearings officer, and this is what dealing with this in the way that we are right now costs us now, I think that would be able to create another contrast of deciding one way or the other on this decision.
Yeah. Well, we'll put our heads together on it. It would be a difficult exercise, but we'll see what we can do. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Take a look.
and I think, you know, it comes down to just time is money.
Yeah.
And you know, how much time, how many hours a week are you guys, or a month, you know, are you guys actually spending on stuff that this hearings officer would just,
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that, you know, we would be preparing the same information for a hearings officer that we
Right.
would be preparing for you. So I guess the question is, how much do you think you're worth?
me? Depends who's asking. But I think that, you know, okay, so what I'm thinking about is hearings officer makes a decision. It gets appealed. It's not coming to us anymore to then come to city council. So that step is gone.
Mhm.
If we are able to send most, if not all of those appeals to Luba, and we are skipping city council, then in some cases that's 2 steps that are eliminated. That's your time exclusively. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could put my head together with Jonathan on it to see if he has any ideas.
Yeah, I
Maybe he
mean,
does, right?
yeah, I can jump in just to sort of, brainstorm this openly with everybody. You know, the hardest part of my job in a lot of different ways is taking a tremendous amount of technical legal information and turning it into something that's digestible for someone who's not a legal professional, or is not in the case of land use and development, is not a planner, or is not a land use consultant, someone like all of you. The hardest thing, the easiest assignment for me when I'm writing something is, I can write 20 pages easily, but to take those 20 pages and turn it into 1 page of condensed and concise information, that takes hours of my day. And I'm not saying that this planning commission has done that to me too many times, but I got to be, candid. In theory, the amount of work that I think Josh and I would have to do, or the planning director and the city attorney would have to do, to prepare for an appeal would be significantly less than it currently is. Just because we're the audience for the things that we would be writing or preparing would be a land use professional. And sure, the staff reports might look the same, but Josh spends I don't know how much time you spend, Josh, just developing PowerPoints for presentations to the planning commission, because frankly, it's complicated. And if you're not knee deep in the trenches with us every single day, which you absolutely have no reason to be, and I'm glad that you're not, just for your own selves, it's hard. And again, just putting this decision in front of a professional, it has a lot of benefits. So and a lot of them are not obvious. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Yeah. I had something else I was going to say. I think for me personally, I have no. Not I think for me personally, I have no qualms relinquishing this stuff to a hearings officer. I do agree with what you're saying about just being involved and staying involved, and we're here in the community. We're here dealing with these issues with people, like we're all living here together. I think that's really important. And I think that we handle it really, really well, but we have to think about the people that come after us. Are they going to be able to handle it as well? We're not all going to be doing this forever. I think that we do a really good job at remaining impartial and looking at the data and looking at the clear and objective guidelines that we helped create in making these decisions. But I can't say that for whoever's going to be here next.
Chair
I think
can I just
think
jump in
that
one last thing? I just wanted to mention, um, it's part of a cycle, I think, to have a hearings officer who's involved, to make decisions based on the code that the planning commission would be more able to draft. And so the legislative policy making, which is in Oregon land use law, the planning commission's recommendation to the city council is a requirement. And so in theory, this should lead, like I'm talking like 40, 50 years from now, right? If all things go okay, it should lead to a much more transparent and fair and consistent system, because decisions will be made by a land use professional, and the policy would be attended to successfully by the planning commission, who would have more time in theory to
yeah,
address bigger issues.
yeah, I mean, and well, also we still make the code. I mean, the decision's still being made off something that we drafted and helped make. So, and we are still there for the decision. We just get someone else to interpret it for us. And in a lot of cases, I think that's going to be, in most cases, I think that's going to be very, very helpful. In some cases, I think that the community may want to hear that decision from someone who lives here, and maybe a little bit of a background as to why, as opposed to some semi-nameless, semi-faceless. I mean, I know they'll have both of these things, but just somebody that no one knows, and that they could say like, well, this guy's making decisions, he doesn't care about us. We don't want that. That makes for disgruntled folk. So I think that some of the decisions we made have been helpful, that they've come from people who live here also, and we can say that. That's kind of my only apprehension, but at the same time, the code's there. We built it. We made it. We follow it. I think that we can deliver those answers just a little bit differently, but the answer is going to be the same no matter what.
Yeah, thank you. I guess sounds like we will present this to city council. Appreciate everybody's comments. I guess maybe the point that we touched on a little bit ago, kind of in the beginning of it, is there any feel one way or the other? Maybe if I could hear from all the commissioners on it, of that final decision. So I can present that to city council to say, really, this is what the planning commission is recommending, maybe. Um, would you like to see a process where the final decision is at the hands of a hearings officer, or would you like to, it sounds like you want to kind of keep it local a little bit, the best you can, or would you like to make it so that we keep it how it is and the city council has that final decision? Granted, this would be a recommendation from y'all, and it's going to be up to the city council to make that decision, but it would be nice to let them know what you are thinking when we have that conversation. So there's the two options: hearings officer makes the final decision, or the city council makes the final decision off of a hearings officer appeal.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
I don't have any recommendation on that for myself.
Okay.
Just because you don't agree with that.
I mean,
You don't, yeah.
I don't dislike the idea. I am just, I think that we will at some point possibly need a hearings officer. I just don't know if it's 100% necessary at this time. And I just had those questions and those statements, keeping it local and providing trust within the community of, when you were mentioning about the faceless, nameless person, I think that just kind of comes to mind. But yeah, I don't think I have anything to where I could give a recommendation.
I would, I mean, I would recommend that since we would like to keep that local flair, whatever you want, however you want to say that, or the local decisions at the local, I think having it go to the city council as the appeals would be a good way. I think we could always go back and redesign that later, after a year or two. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure, but I'm just, like potentially we could do it for that RFP for that contract. And then the next time the contract comes up, we could say, no, it's working really well. We like how it's working. The hearings officer could be the final decision. That may be a way to get our feet wet, so to say, as far as that would be. And then the city council still would have that final decision if there was an appeal. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and that is consistent with what we mentioned in the staff report, is consistent with what Wasco County is doing now. So
if it doesn't, and if it doesn't work that way and we don't like how that works, then I think we could go back to the drawing board and have it stop at the hearings officer.
Carrie?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. To keep someplace where folks have a local opportunity to be heard if they're concerned about a decision, before it goes all the way up to the state, and it feels far away and impersonal, and like somebody not from here is making a choice that has a significant impact on our community. And hopefully the council continues to take the information and make the appropriate decisions moving forward. Based on what the hearings officer is coming through with, and the information that the community members are providing. So I think that makes sense. And like Addie said, if it doesn't feel like it's working in a couple of years, and come back and make another shift. But I think it's a valuable thing to try to keep.
Maria? Commissioner Pena, are you muted? You are muted. Okay. My decision is, I think it should, I'm kind of an all or nothing type guy. So I feel like the hearings officer should be the final decision for the city. And the only reason that I say that is because I think that if we are to, it's really tough to say. I'm all about the efficiency, and I'd like to keep things moving. And I know that's a big frustration for anyone who's doing any kind of application developer is just like, you've already made the choice to get it done. So like, let's get it done. If a decision is appealed, I think it should go back to city council instead of directly to Luba. Is that possible?
If a decision is appealed, what kind of decision?
Okay, hearings officer says this is the deal. He's the final word for the city. If that
Yeah.
decision is appealed, can it go back to city council at that time and then go to Luba, or does it just go to Luba?
Well,
Oh.
if the final decision is with the hearings officer, the city's final decision is the only kind of decision that goes to Luba.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's-
so yeah, so that's
but-
possible.
But oftentimes, when a case goes to Luba, they don't actually make any substantive decisions. So let's say somebody appeals a decision by a city council and a city council or a county commission denied an application based on something that wasn't in the record, right? They had some sort of bias or something like that.
Huh.
Luba's not going to say, okay, developer, your application is actually approved now because that county commissioner was biased. What Luba will say is, the county commission's decision was biased, and so it is void. And so the case has been remanded, which means sent back to the county in this case, this hypothetical case, for a redo, effectively. And
Okay.
in which case they're under now there's a judicial order, like a judge has ordered the case to be remanded back to the decision-making body, whoever that is, based off of the local code, to make the decision consistent with the local code standards. Now, when it comes to drafting, like let's say the city council takes the recommendation to explore this idea, and they direct the planning director and me to get working on this, we could, in theory, absolutely include a provision in there that says for example, the hearings officer is the city's final decision maker, but if it goes to Luba and is remanded back, that decision would go to the city council, because at that point it's a completely different process. And so does that answer your question? Is that what you were trying to get to?
Yeah, it does. So in that case, I think that, I think that the hearings officer's decision should be the city's final decision. And I think that it should become the planning commission and the city council's formal responsibility to just stay super informed and super on top of the decisions that the hearings officer is making. Maybe the planning chair needs to, well, I'm sure the mayor would be listening into the hearings officer's decisions, but I think that the planning commission chair should be present or at least semi-engaged in these, not engaged in participating, but just like be there. You have to be there. Yeah. And then city councilors, the mayor, they need to just be informed on that stuff too, so that they see what's happening, they see what the people are saying. And I think that involvement is important. I think it's critical. But I think that efficiency and getting things through the system is equally so. Because I look at some of the city council agendas. I look at a lot of the city council's agendas, and they're lengthy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on there. So I think to help lighten their load, I think that's important. Like we're a growing town. We have a lot of stuff to get to. That's kind of my take on that. To an existential point, I don't like the fact that we're kind of removing these bodies from the process, the planning commission, the city council and stuff. But at the same time, like this is all going in one direction. You know what I mean? A town is either growing or dying, and we're growing. And I think it's important to lay the framework appropriately for that. Better to do it now.
Sounds good. Yeah. I appreciate everybody's work and discussion on this. As I mentioned, we'll be, taking your comments it to city council on the 28th. Speaking of busy agendas, hopefully I can get on it. But yes, that is a great point. I mean, last year we had some horrendously long city council agendas, but it sounds like though I will be bringing to them that it sounds like the consensus of the board here is really to kind of keep maybe the city council is that last decision. You're singled out here, Chair Cornett.
I'm an outlier. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, I do appreciate all the comments on this, and it is a different idea. It's a totally different idea. It's a total restructuring of what has been in place for many, many years here in the Dalles. So, yeah, with that, I don't have anything else on this topic.
Okay. Do you have any comments or project updates?
Yeah, so after all this, and we talked about restructuring and reducing the number of meetings, I think we're gonna have probably like 3 meetings coming up in a row. But seriously, if we like drop it to 1 meeting a month, we would just make sure that we kind of front load those, and it's totally doable. So the next meeting is going to be on the 17th, and you should have received a notice sometime today. It's a notice of appeal. So the subdivision that you worked on for that variance application up on the subdivision behind the hospital, so that has been appealed by the neighborhood, or at least one individual. And it seems like there was about 15 neighbors, I think, that tagged on to the appeal. So we will be presenting that to you at the next meeting. Following that, I believe there's, coming up at the first meeting in May, there is I think it's a conditional use permit for a project over on the west side of town. This is another one. It's for a storage facility, but it is a conditional use permit because it's in our general commercial zone, which is a zone that's typically for retail. So, and then after that, I would have to take a look again what it is, but those are the 2 items coming up. I'm not sure if I mentioned it at the last meeting. The Basalt Commons project, we are working through the building permit review of Basalt Commons now. We did approve 1 subdivision, just 2 subdivisions were approved. The one that was appealed, as well as there's another subdivision over on the west side of town. It's off of Kingsley and like 15th. It's another about 25 to 30 lot subdivision. And then we're actually reviewing 1 more right now that's like a little 6-plex type of townhouse subdivision. So staying very, very busy, extremely busy. It's springtime has hit and we are in full gear.
Where's that sixer you're talking about?
It's off 9th. So that area of 9th where we took down the old house and we punched the utilities through. So it's over there. It's it's a nice little spot now that they have full utilities. We're probably going to see a little bit of development pop up over there now that house is out of the way, brand new utilities in, great views of the river. So yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about it. So the East 21st subdivision that we did the block depth variance on, if we had a hearings officer, that wouldn't be appealing back to us, right?
No, it would be it would be appealed to the hearings officer.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
So like stuff like that, I think, I'm super interested to hear what these people have to say. I hope that they come in with substantive criteria. But at the same time, if it's one of those things like we just don't want a subdivision by us, that's not helping us get to the next step in what the planning commission needs to do.
Right. I think, that's about it for comments on my end.
Okay.
Probably missing something, but
commissioner comments or questions?
I think last time we went over some, you were going through interviews. I was just curious about how staffing has been going.
Yeah. So we are hopefully going to be finalizing the process, the interview process for the community development administrative assistant position, Paula's old position, so she can kind of move into the other aspects. She hasn't had really much of an opportunity to take on her new job because she's kind of covering two at the same time right now. So that's happening. We are also in the recruitment process for an economic development officer. Our economic development officer, Dan Spots, who was with the city for about a year and a half, been in the community for a very, very long time. He actually retired just about 2 weeks ago. So Dan and I worked side by side with the urban renewal agencies. So he's dearly missed, and we will find a replacement. Yep. That's where we're at right now. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, yeah, it's a city-wise, it's been a frenzy of hiring. A lot of, our hiring for a new finance director, hiring for an assistant city manager position, recently filled our deputy public works director position, our public works director position. So quite a few changes here at the city.
It's great. I mean, it's great those positions being filled.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
All right. I have nothing else. Meeting adjourned.
I don't believe I'll be at the next meeting.
Okay.
I'm gonna